I'm a big fan. Mike, you know.
She said we got to have Walter Jones to start this meeting.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Agriculture and Natural Resources Subcommittee is now in session. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Vice Chairman Darby. Here. Representative Fritz. Here. Chairman Grills.
Here.
Chairman Halsey. Here. Representative Jones. Representative Reedy. Here. Representative Shaw. Here. Representative Todd. Here. Representative Travis. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Kyle. If you all would, please stand, and Representative Travis is going to lead us in the pledge, and then when he's done, Representative Fritz is going to lead us in the prayer. It is good to see everyone this morning. Last week, I got in a little bit of a hurry and did not introduce our committee staff. And right off the bat here, I want to apologize for that. But we have our research analysts, Ethan Bledsoe and Jeremy Maxwell. Would you please let everybody know who Ethan is? And I don't see Jeremy. And Jeremy's over in the corner. Everybody knows Jeremy. Tyler Munez is our sergeant of arms. We love Tyler. Kyle, my assistant, is the committee secretary. And John Culverhouse, fresh from Atlanta, Georgia, is with us today. So good to have you up here in Big Orange Country. With that, do we have any personal order? Tyler, you're recognized for words of wisdom.
Good morning, everyone. Today's words of wisdom have been screamed at the top of my lungs. Every rose has its thorn, just like every night has its dawn. Poison. Have a great day.
Now y'all understand why we love him so much. He's a great guy. If you don't know him, get to. He's always running around here doing something. Right off the bat, we have several bills on notice today. The first bill on the calendar is HB 1054, and I will roll that bill to the Hill. I do not see Chairman Vaughn here. Oh, there he is, but we're going to roll it to the Hill to make sure we have enough time to get the other people in front of you. Okay, without objection, roll to the Hill. Next, we have Speaker Marsh. You are, let's see, on HB 375. We have a motion and a second. You are properly before the committee. Speaker, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This proposal we have today is dealing with the Duck River Development Agency, which is based in Bedford County, and it serves as a protector of the Duck River, which goes through Coffee, Bedford, Marshall, Murray, and a little bit of Hickman. The Duck River Agency was created in 1965 by TCA 641-601 for the purpose of developing and effectuating plans and programs for comprehensive development including the control and development of the water resources of the portions of the Upper Duck River watershed. This agency has been in existence for 50 years. 3 years ago, it was set to be sunsetted. It was extended for 3 years. And if we don't do something this year, it will go away in June of 2024. The goal of this proposed legislation is to restructure Duck River Agency so a reliable, long-term revenue stream is available that will support the DRA's mission, which is developing, protecting, and sustaining a clean and dependable water resource for the citizens of the Duck River region. Some of the points are the Duck River is a Tennessee state natural resource treasure, notable for its biological diversity. It's one of the most diverse rivers in the nation. Balancing the needs for population growth and aquatic life is complicated but doable. The Duck River Agency has operated for 50+ years on a volunteer agreement with the Duck River Basin Water Systems, which expire in June of this year. What we're trying to do is secure the future by requiring a membership fee from the water utilities with a Tennessee Aquatic Resource Alternative Permit, ARAP, issued by the Department of Environment Conservation based on the amount of treated water delivered to the water systems. We're reorganizing the existing TRA board by adding members from each water system that pays a membership fee. I do have someone here today that will speak on this if you all would like to hear. We have Doug Murphy, who is head of the agency. If you need more explanation, we can come up and talk. If not, maybe I can answer your questions.
Chairman Reedy?
Thank you, sir. At this time, Mr. Chairman, do we need to put, it sound like you spoke to the amendment?
Yeah.
Do we need to put the amendment on?
You would be correct.
Motion on amendment
So we have a motion on the amendment. a second on-
11307.
That's right.
That's what I have as well.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you, Chairman Reedy. We have a motion on the amendment, a second on the amendment. All in favor of putting the amendment on the bill, say aye. Aye. All opposed? On the bill. Now we're back on the bill. Now, would you like to have those people, Mr. Doug, speak, or what would you like to do?
It's a pleasure of the committee.
Questions being called on the bill, but we may have questions. We have objections. I know there are people that want to ask a few questions. Okay. Thank you, Representative Travis. Okay. Without objection, without session, Mr. Murphy. How are you today?
I'm
You
great.
have 3 minutes to make an opening statement, and then we'll ask you a few questions, and you can sit down. How's that sound?
That sounds perfect.
All right. You have
Appreciate
it.
the opportunity, Chairman Grills. You know, this,
Please state your name for the committee.
Doug Murphy, Executive Director of the Duck River Agency. I'd just like to point some highlights of what this bill does. First, this bill does nothing to our original statute and what our objective and our mission is about. In fact, with increased growth in this Duck River Basin area, we need this bill to come essentially to be a agency that protects the Duck River. That is our number one goal, plus meet our needs of our citizens. This bill requires a membership fee. This is something a little different than what we've been working with for a little over 50 years. We have had an agreement with our water systems that paid a nickel per 1,000 gallons of water they sold. This bill changes that to a membership fee based on treated water that's delivered to their water systems. This bill creates an incentive for our water systems to now fix leaking pipes that they have, because they will be paying a membership fee based on some of the leakages they have. So this is a conservation incentive that our water systems requested. This bill will create possibly a little bit additional revenue, depending on what the board decides. That additional revenue could actually go into a pot or a fund that will be used to help our small water systems concentrate and fix those leaks. In other words, the big boys are helping the little guys out. This bill also adds the water systems to our board. Right now, we have a 12-member board appointed by the governor. This bill gives each water system that is a member a position on that board. We are building a larger support from our community. This also quantifies the Duck River Agency Technical Advisory Committee, which was formed by resolution by the Duck River Agency Board. Now they will be a public entity formed by law. And Mr. Chairman, that's really my quick version.
Thank you for that. Now, we have anyone want to ask a question? We have a list already going. Chairman Todd, we'll recognize you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate you being here, Director. One question I have is, do the fees and the fee structure only apply to the water districts themselves, not anybody that they serve or any other entity?
You're recognized.
If you have an aquatic resource alterations permit from the state of Tennessee, you will be a paying member. Now, those folks sell water to the smaller wholesales, so they will be paying that fee through the membership.
Chairman Todd.
And those ARAP permits are only for withdrawal of water.
Correct.
Thank you. One of the, and many folks here know that the Duck River is one of my favorite topics to talk about in this committee. But one of the purposes that this group has is developing clean water resources, I think is what I understood from the opening statements. Tell me some of the things that you might utilize. And you mentioned fixing leaks, but any other things? Well, first of all, can you give me an idea of what funds you have on hand? And then maybe what a yearly expectation is going to be budget wise. And then what else do you plan on doing with those funds? You recognize.
Thank you. Right now we have what we call our operating project trust, which has about 1.8 million in it. We have a infrastructure trust, I'm just using short terms here, that has about 13 million in it. The large trust, the 13 million, is set aside, and it gets complicated but it's set aside for regional infrastructure projects only. And our water system boards have to approve the expenditures out of that. Our annual operating is averaging over the last couple of years around 400,000. The agency has an agreement with our water systems that we get 70% of that to cover our administrative costs. 30% goes into our project and operating trust, the 1.8 million. The agency in the past has really focused under my watch on developing long-term plans for regional water supply. That's been my focus since I came to the agency. And we did that in 2011. We developed a comprehensive regional water supply plan that recommended 5 projects to look at future needs of our citizens for the next 50 years. And those projects are what we are concentrating on implementing. And those projects all are connected very close to environmental reviews, not only with TDEC, but also with Tennessee Valley Authority and Fish and Wildlife Service. And if I need to explain those projects, I'll be glad to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One last question I have is related to some information we learned last year in discussing the Duck River. Obviously, there are folks withdrawing water, which is what you're dealing with, but there are also discharges into the Duck River. And one of those is the municipal wastewater system at Columbia. And we got an understanding last year, it was established that for a number of years, maybe at least 4 or 5 years, they have consistently been violating the standards that they're regulated to discharge their water. So they're discharging polluted water in violation of their permit. Is there any opportunity for this trust fund that you already have to assist in cleaning up that water that somebody else is then going to withdraw?
You're recognized.
The possibility is there. I'm very much aware of the Columbia wastewater treatment plant issues, as I am with all our other wastewater treatment plants. It's all one water. It's very important to connect water withdrawals to wastewater. Some good news is Columbia received $4.8 million out of the ARP funding to help improve their treatment process. And my knowledge, they have not had really any negative reports, bad reports on their treatment issue. They've changed the way they treat their water to take care of some of the E. coli problems that was being picked up by the state. Right now, the state is on a 5-year schedule. This year will be, they'll be doing some sampling to look to see if Columbia is taking care of those issues. To all our knowledge, they have, and these additional funds that they receive will go to improve that process just to make it better. And we support all our wastewater because we do recycle it. What's discharged up here is picked up by the next municipality, so forth down the system.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
We also have April Grippo from TDEC on our list. If you have any questions for her, she's here available to answer those. That would be up to you if you'd want to speak with her.
Probably will, at least a simple question.
Okay. Is any other questions for Mr. Murphy? Representative Reedy? I'm sorry, Representative Fritz, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quick question. I suspect that with this, there's a potential that the customer, the end user of the water, may pay a few cents more, a few dollars more. Have you done an analysis to compare what that customer is paying today for the lost water, for the leaks, and how those two balance out? How the investment in repairing the leaks is going to actually be cost effective?
You recognize?
I cannot say it's been a detailed study. We just done some back of the envelope type numbers looking at it. And what is really exciting is that the larger water systems are wanting to use the additional funds that we would collect with the way it's being membership fees to help support those smaller systems that are strapped financially, they don't have the resources. So my motto is working together works. And this is really an example of working together works.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, Mr. Murphy? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Hope you have a safe trip home. And at this time, we'll have Ms. Grippo come up and answer a few questions. You have a good day. If you would, please state your name and do you have anything you'd like to say, or you just want to answer questions?
Good morning, April Grippo with TDEC. I'll just echo what Doug Murphy said about the question about the Columbia wastewater treatment plant. They were having some problems and we sent some NOVs back in the past few years. My understanding is that as of November of 22, they were able to make some treatment changes and turn their problems with E. coli and nutrients, ammonia violations around in the short term. It's also correct that TDEC awarded $4.8 million in ARP funds. We've currently permitted, as of about this time last year, I think March of last year, we permitted an upgrade and they're currently working on that. So we're out there sampling this year and should know later this year if there have been any improvements in the past 5 years to the overall water quality.
Chairman Todd?
So thank you for that assessment. So in the last year, are you saying that they've not had any violations with their permitted discharge?
I'm not aware of any DMR violations, but I do know that we have not sent another NOV in the past year.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for being here. That'll let you off the rest of the day now. All right. We'll go back in session without objection. Back in session. Speaker Marsh, you're recognized.
Make a motion, we can move on if you don't have any more questions.
We have questions being called on the bill. All in favor of sending House Bill 375 to full committee, say aye. Any opposed? Next week in full.
Thank
Speaker
you,
Marsh,
Mr.
if you so
Chairman.
choose.
Thank you, committee.
All right. Next on the list, we have House Bill 1674 by Chairman Wright. We have a motion and we have a second. You're properly before the committee. I do not believe that there's an amendment on this bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee, and distinguished guest. I'm going to defer to Chairman Vaughn and that I'll only use half my notes so that we might expeditiously get to his bill. I stand before you on behalf of the Division of Forestry. And let me say, outdoor recreation in the state of Tennessee has been increasing. As a tourism state, that's a plus for us. I'll characterize this bill as a fix-it bill in that with the Tennessee Division of Forestry being moved out of the Tennessee Department of Environmental and Conservation, the Commissioner of Agriculture didn't receive the authority to for a fee, have activities like equestrian events or extended camping or other events, and thereby have the means to finance proper maintenance and protection of forestry assets. This bill also more clearly defines the authority of state forester, the ability to work with nonprofits and other entities, and the work of recreation and asset protection. And in closing, I'd like to read just one segment to show that we have a little bit of control. Subparagraph E, monies in the fund may be extended only in accordance with annual appropriations approved by the General Assembly. And with that explanation of the Fix-It bill, I stand for questions.
We also have 3 people on the list to testify if the committee wishes to hear from them, from the department, and the department inside the department. They have the forestry department, and they're here as well. So, but seeing, do we have anyone who wants to ask a question? Do you have any reason to bring them up, Chairman Wright?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Wright? We'll entertain a motion to move forward and vote on this. We have a question on the bill. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? On the full next week.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Wright. All right. Chairman Reedy, House Bill 393.
Motion.
We have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, would you prefer me to go to the
You're fine
podium?
right there.
House Bill 393, of course, it was.
We do have an amendment on the bill. Would you like to put the amendment?
The amendment is 6017.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the amendment. This makes the bill, correct?
It does, yes, sir.
So all in favor of putting the amendment on the bill, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The amendment's on the bill. You are recognized on the amended bill, Mr. Chairman Reedy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And of course, this was passed last year. Senator Nicely had brought that to us, and it was kind of the nth hour of session. That's why it's late coming before this committee. I will read the summary of the bill as amended. It exempts itinerant, which is basically mobile butchering service or mobile slaughtering. And it says exempts itinerant slaughters from inspection and licensing requirement under the Tennessee Meat and Poultry Inspection Act. Defines an itinerant slaughterer as a person who, for compensation or gain, engages in the slaughter of itinerant livestock slaughter, the slaughter of livestock owned by one or more persons for the person's exclusive use or for use by members of the owners or owners' household and the owners or owners' non-paying guests and employees. Established condition by which an itinerant slaughterer may slaughter livestock owned by a person on the farm where the livestock is raised. And of course, a backstory to that, many states are already doing this. They come to the home, collect up the animal, and then they take it back to their butcher shop where they age the animal and then custom slaughter to your needs. And an example would be, in my younger days, our farm back in Idaho was a postage stamp size farm, and we did not have any trailers to transport hogs or cattle that was on the farm. It was about this time many years ago, and we took turns, as far as my mother and myself, milking cows. And this one morning, she come in from milking. She was covered in milk. The milk pail was empty, but she was limping. And she had her insulated bibs and pulled them down, and this old cow kicked her in her thigh, and it was black and blue. Needless to say, my brothers and I, we go off to school, and when we come home, the mobile service was there, and that cow was gone before we got home. But that it's a way to help our rural, small-time farmers be able to collect that animal up without them having to get transportation, get it moved to the slaughterhouse wherever it's needed. And of course, this committee's been talking about, custom slaughterhouses, how few they are, and hopefully we'll keep moving in the right direction for food safety. And of course, that's where nothing changes. It's still the regulation on how it's inspected and everything else is still in place, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any questions, Chairman Reedy? Seeing none. Representative Shaw?
Would you read that again? My friend, Johnny Shaw.
I hear a question on the bill. All right. All in favor of moving this bill 393 to full committee, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
If you wish to be registered as a no, please let the clerk know. You're on the full next week there, Chairman Reedy. And
Thank you,
next
sir.
we have Chairman Reedy once again for House Bill 1666.
Mr. Chairman.
We need a motion.
We need a motion.
We have a motion. We have a second. You're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And this stems off of our challenges in our different districts, different counties, the flooding situations that take place. And for the last few years, working with TDEC, and of course, I reached out because of the flooding that took place in Humphreys County. 20 lives were lost, $1 million was spent. You know, we ended up as a state offering up 20 million for replacement of the 2 school buildings that were lost in Houston County. And certainly a roundtable discussion, and West Tennessee River Basin Authority Director David Lockwood, I reached out to him. This is what we come up with, and it's interesting that Kentucky Lake, I represent now Benton County and Henry County, which is on the western half of Kentucky Lake, but on the eastern half of Kentucky Lake is Stewart County, which I represent now, Houston, Humphreys, as well as Perry County. And this is a permissive bill that would allow those counties, if they wanted to join the West Tennessee River Basin Authority, to do so. Now, looking at the fiscal note, there's dollars associated with that. Anytime we come into flooding, trying to dig ourselves out, how many millions our state or the need for TEMA to show up with federal dollars to recover from this. But if it would please me if we would go out of session, ask Mr. David Blackwood to come and help explain. He can explain a whole lot better. My Senate sponsor is Senator Stevens, who is on the board for West Tennessee River Basin Authority. And here I was trying to explain the bill, and Senator Stevens says, I know all about it. I'm on the board. So I said, I'll shut up and let you explain how this is going to work. So David would be most helpful, especially to the committee members, sir.
Without objection, we'll go out of session and have Mr. Blackwood come up to the podium, if you would. I think he's here. Yes, there he is. He was here last week, and we were bragging on him last week, and we'll brag on him again this week. He does a fantastic job for the counties he serves in West Tennessee. And if you're in the farming community, every farmer knows and appreciates his work. And you are recognized. Please state your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Hey, David Blackwood, Director of the West Tennessee River Basin Authority, and glad to be back. Thank you for your kind comments. It does me good to weekly come hear good things, right? So we have been discussing with Representative Reedy about the struggles they have over in those 4 counties. Our agency is, as y'all probably well know, is a maintenance agency for 20 counties in West Tennessee. Keep our rivers open and functioning. We do a lot of flood control projects. We do a lot of special grant projects where we focus on our waters, our watersheds. And I understand these 4 counties to have a really big need in that area. They're rural, I believe Perry's rural distressed. And they experienced a really big flood in Humphreys County. And for a little background, these areas were looked at being added in 2018. And it went, everybody was in favor. I think Humphreys County is where it did not. And if everybody knows what happened in 2021, I think they've changed their mind. It was a terrible tragedy, big loss of life. And there's a lot of opportunity in those counties to do some good things. They really need the technical assistance and study, and there's some maintenance issues there. So my board is aware of this and is amenable to it. This would permit them to join. The board would still have to set conditions on how you join and what that looks like. So that would still go through the board process. But yeah, I'm available for any questions on that.
Right off the bat then, Chairman Reedy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Blackwood, give us, for those that are viewing, but those on this committee and in this room, just an update. How important was it after the flood that the West Tennessee River Basin Authority came to Humphreys County as well as TEMA to help clean up and solve some of the current issues that we had?
You're recognized.
Day of, we came over with our equipment because we're next door neighbors. We saw what was going on, just felt like we needed to. That day specifically, our crews pulled 12 people out and a bulldog that was floating on a mattress. So that was interesting. So, day of was very important, but being engaged afterwards, we took part in the flood task force. That was TEMA, TDEC, U.S. Army Corps. I've been very involved with that and how they're doing their modeling and taking a lot of knowledge that we have from floods in West Tennessee and how those processes have gone on, and really trying to make sure that the things that you may not consider are considered and that you recover in the right way so you don't experience this again.
Chairman Reedy?
And with that, it was the outpour of help from many counties. Many counties, many cities showed up with their trucks just to haul off debris, and I'm so thankful for that. But we do have Humphreys County, the elected body, there's attention on this, and they're very cordial to the idea as well. And members, looking at the fiscal note, it is very high, just like everything else, but it's still a lot less than the 20 million that we as the state gave up for new school buildings. But with that, I'll just leave it right there, Mr. Chairman, so open it up for other committee members, and then just direct back to me after that time. Thank you, sir.
I got a couple questions, if you don't mind there, Mr. Blackwood. So currently, if this were to take place, how would the counties that you serve now be impacted?
If this were to take place, the counties that we serve now would not be impacted. The maintenance that would be in this area is a different kind than our amphibious maintenance. It'd be more of a land-based. So it includes an additional crew that'd be able to cover those duties and a technical staff member who would be able to serve those technical needs for the flood studies and pursuing a grant project.
Well, currently, are you funded at the rate that you feel like you need, or could you use more dollars? It's not a trick question.
We could always use more dollars.
I figured you'd say that. So what more do you need then to actually serve the counties that you are responsible for now, the 20 counties that you are responsible for?
I believe we have a request in for replacing an amphibious traco.
Replace or add another?
Well, add another.
Okay.
We have one that's died and gone and not in a replacement cycle. We need another amphibious traco. And we also need this crew partially for our area because, as I mentioned, this will be a land-based crew. When we have those things come up currently, we'll take some of our amphibious staff may have to go over and cover that. So this will prevent that. This will keep them focused on where they're at and on that amphibious traco, which I mentioned that. I don't know if y'all are familiar. It's a very large traco on pontoons that floats right down the middle of the river. It can go across a lake. It's kind of a giant beast. So if we can keep those running, keep that hour meter spinning, we'll be good.
So the purpose you have now for the counties that you serve in West Tennessee is pretty much to keep those man-made channels open and flowing. But when you go over to the other side of the Tennessee River, that's not a man-made channel. How is that going to dilute the services that the counties that I represent now? I just can't see that it will not dilute the services that we're receiving on a weekly, monthly, and annual basis. And can you assure me that that's not going to affect the 3 counties that I represent?
I've looked at it extensively, and if I thought it would, I would ask for more. I think it's sufficient for what we have going on.
Well, my desire is to see these counties. It's horrible what happened a few years ago, and we want to see these counties served. But is this the best way forward? And that's what I'm a little apprehensive on. And so I have some questions in my mind, but at the same time, I put a lot of confidence in you and your agency.
I understand the reservations, and the best I can offer is I've looked at it several different ways. I feel this would be the best, most efficient method to get this done.
Chairman Todd?
Thank you. Good to see you today. And I think the statements about your agency definitely are very well-deserved. And I will add one. I don't know of a state entity that gets more out of a tax dollar than West Tennessee River Basin Authority. You guys have some great employees that not only run these pieces of equipment and do very effective professional work, but they literally in the off season, when they can't be out in the field, they're maintaining the equipment, adding pieces. They fabricate things in the shop that you need, unique tools and things that you need to add on to these pieces of equipment. That's pretty amazing. And so I don't didn't want to have this meeting go past without stating that and making sure folks understand that. So I already have a high confidence level in what your agency does and in the personnel that you have. And just in gleaning from the comments you've made so far and the questions that have been asked, would it be a good summary to say that this additional crew will be utilized some, and maybe you could give me an estimated percentage. I know it's hard to predict, but some in the current 20 counties that the basin already covers, the Basin Authority already covers.
You recognize them?
Yes, this additional crew will have some responsibilities in the 20 counties as well. So I estimate, just from what we've reviewed, when we came, we did some voluntary work as part of a large cleanup effort. I think for the working equipment operator part, it'll take about 30% of their time, 35%. They'll also have some duties on some flood control lakes, which is a growing issue in West Tennessee. We're having to do maintenance on some abandoned lakes from watershed districts shutting down. So that they'll balance out a little bit with that too. And then for the technical staff member, they'll be dedicated to that area and flood studies and grants and that kind of thing.
Chairman Todd?
Okay, thank you. So to summarize that, then this new crew will be somewhat beneficial to the 20 existing counties now, and then the probably a little heavier on the technical assistance for the new counties.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Chairman Darby?
Thank you for coming 2 weeks in a row. What a pleasure. But just a tip of the hat, I think the chairman have asked the right questions. Just wanted to tip the hat and say, hey, we appreciate what you do in Northwest Tennessee.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Hosey?
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for being here. This is permissive, so these 4 counties could join if they want to join. Is that their intent now? Do you know that all 4 are going to?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, I believe, you laid out the mission of what it would be in those 4 counties. And with that, I also want to just recognize the fact that West Tennessee River Basin operates under TDEC. So TDEC should get some of the credit for y'all's good job that y'all do as well. That'd only be fair, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Chairman Reedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And of course, with as we were meeting, I got to discussing this with Mr. Blackwood, and I said, well, being as we got the code open, what if somewhere else, Representative Holsey, in your part, that you wanted to create a river basin authority? So part of this legislation is also cleaning up antiquated language going forward to help out other districts and other counties within the state. Thank you.
Well, if there's no other questions, Mr. Blackwood, thank you for coming once again. And we will go back into session. We're back in the session. Chairman Reedy, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. And of course, we're looking at the governor's looking at funding this in his legislation bill coming forward. So at this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take and roll this for 2 weeks.
Without objection, we'll roll for 2 weeks. Chairman Todd?
Thanks, Chairman Grills. Next on the agenda, we have House Bill 1689 by Chairman Grills. Have a motion and a second. You're recognized, Chairman Grills, on House Bill 1689.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. What we have here, and I represent Dyer County, and we've had lots of problems with tires being dropped off in different fields and driveways and different places. So what we've had is people who will come in and they'll promise to take tires, and they'll take the dollars from the person that has the tires and say, we'll promise to get rid of them. They take the tires, load them up on a trailer, drive off somewhere, dump them on somebody's abandoned property, sometime maybe even be mine. And then the DA comes in, they have no way to know who's done it. So what we are doing here is creating a registration of $100 a year for whoever the tire transporter is. Whenever they pick up the tires from a place, they have to sign off saying, hey, we picked up this many tires. And then when they delivered them to an end use, they have to sign off and saying, okay, we've delivered them here. And that way, when the tires are dropped somewhere, they have a beginning point and an ending point. So therefore, the DA knows that they did not dump the tires. And what we are trying to do is clean up some of the road beds that y'all see tires everywhere. So with that, that is the explanation of this bill and primarily what it does. We do have TDEC here to answer questions and maybe give a little more detailed information on it if the chairman would approve of that or anyone has any questions.
Representative Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In this piece of legislation, and what comes to mind, if I end up buying a new piece of property, farmland, and I decide to clean that up and get a truckload of tires, is there a restriction on how many? So in other words, I don't have to file for a permit, and where I go to the convenience center to haul off all of these old tires that's been stacked around forever, is that going to cause a conflict with new property owners?
Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not that I know of, but we have TDEC here to answer any questions you may have on the technical end.
There's been a request to go out of session. Without objection, we will go out of session and ask a TDEC representative to come forward. So we are out of session. Just make sure the microphone is on and state your name and your organization, and then maybe.
Everybody, my name is Jeremy Hooper from TDEC's Division of Solid Waste Management. Glad to be here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. Representative Reedy, you're recognized.
In this piece of legislation, it seemed like last year we were having the same discussion, and as a vehicle owner, it was to these transfer stations or dump or wherever I could take. Was it only up to 4? Is there a restriction on number of tires that I could only haul at one time?
Not from TDEC.
Okay. Is there going to be any restrictions? Of course, licensing folks to be tire haulers, is there a magic number you're coming up with that if I do clean up a piece of property that has a pile of tires on it?
You're recognized.
This wouldn't be for like the average person who's moving tires from their own property or for cleaning up. We would put some exemptions in via regulations for ag-related things, situations like you're talking about. So we're really trying to capture those folks that this is what they do. This is their business, moving tires back and forth from collecting them to disposal.
Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, thank you for being and clarifying that, and I look forward to the rules. Thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you. I think this is a good bill. I just wanted to ask, how would this affect, if any way, those dealerships who buy and put tires on people's cars and so forth? Would there be any kind of effect in any way to them? How would they fit into this?
So
Recognized.
they would only come into effect if they're disposing of a large amount of tires, right? So like if they're selling new tires and then they take old tires that they're not going to resell, they're sending them off for disposal. If they then contract with a hauler to come get them, then they'll have to sign on that manifest, as was mentioned earlier, just saying, I gave them to this hauler.
Thank you.
Shaw. Representative Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we've worked on this for a while on trying to get tires shredded and used for other purposes and other reasons. I asked this to another group this morning. They really didn't know, and I don't know if you know either. Now where we're at, out of 100 tires, how many of them make it to a landfill and how many of them make it to some other form of usefulness? You know?
You're recognized.
I'm not. So, we give out grants, not my division, but TDEC, for beneficial reuse of tires, coming up with new technologies, testing out things. And so I could potentially get some figures. I can go back and talk with them and see if we could tease out some of that information.
I just want to make sure we're progressing.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for our guests? We appreciate you being here. Without objection, we'll go back into session.
Thank you.
Back into session and on the bill. Question has been called. Without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 1689. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. This moves on to full committee.
Thank you, Chairman Todd and committee. All right, now we're coming back to the heel of the calendar. Chairman Vaughn, you are recognized if we get a motion and a second. We have a motion and we have a second on House Bill 1054. Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and if you would, just give me the high sign when my 5 minutes is up, I'd appreciate it. I tend to bloviate and like what I'm saying and carry on past that. I appreciate the committee hanging with us on this issue because it's a complicated one. It's one that frankly, I'm very passionate about and others are also passionate about it. So I appreciate y'all's listening to it. What I'd like to remind you of is that in May, I believe it was May, that the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that waters of the U.S. were no longer anything that any ponded water or anything like that. What they've done is they said that they no longer regulate isolated wetlands. That puts the wetland, so what I'm saying is that waters of the state would also not include isolated wetlands. If we did that, that would place us in the same condition as 24 other states in the country. It would move us off a list of 19 states, put us on one that would have with 24 others. I spoke last time about the fact that this is a result of this, what I consider to be bureaucratic overreach, involves unnecessary inflation of the price of construction. So as we look at this, I'd like to, I know there's a lot of other people to speak and I don't want to take up their times because some of them have traveled and I'll be here ad infinitum. But I want to remind you that right now, the vast majority of wetlands, isolated or otherwise, are found in agricultural and forested lands. Forestry and agriculture are exempt from the Clean Water Act. So these are unregulated in these areas. Also, with regards to flooding and flood control, and we just heard about the work that the West Tennessee River Basin Authority does. FEMA and the National Flood Insurance Program are the entities that regulate flood control on a national basis. So they're the ones who determine what's a regulated floodway and what can be, and no fill can be lawfully placed into a regulated floodway. So we have flood control. I don't believe this is going to affect flooding in one bit. And then lastly, I want to touch on a piece that I think is real important for all of us. And that has to do with the waters of the state. And I think that when we come up here and we listen to experts and all, there's sometimes that we gloss over things that we hear, but this is really important that I think that we should have, the knowledge that we should have and decide whether or not this is the way we want our state regulated. Because based on the nature of water bodies, and these are TDEC's words, based on the nature of water bodies in Tennessee, these hydrologic features are presumed to be connected to groundwater unless a permit applicant can demonstrate there is a barrier. So the onus is on landowners to prove that surface water is not connected to groundwater, and groundwater is not defined. They're not saying aquifers. They're saying any groundwater. Is this groundwater as defined in that? It may not even extend below the root zone. And so understand how regulated today that all of our private property is based upon these positions. What I'm asking for is to move the bar back more to where it's more equitable in the benefit of landowners. And that's what this bill does.
Mr. Chairman, you had another minute and 12 seconds.
Oh, I'll go more than that on the back
You've already
side.
given up. You surrendered. We have several people on the list to testify. If you'd be okay with the committee, let's go out of session and allow those people to come up and testify since some of them have driven long ways. Without objection, we're out of session. And was it Chris Vangas, Sarah Houston, Blair Beatty, Ali Williamson, Greg Young, and David Blackwood? That's who I have on the list. Any of you would like to come up now? Come on up. Chairman, what order do you want us to go? Jumping up. We'll start on our left and move that way if that's okay. Yes, sir. And some may only be here to answer questions. That's perfectly fine. but just state your name. Mr. Blackwood, you were recognized first.
David Blackwood, West Tennessee River Basin Authority.
Scott Schaffnacher, Science Director of Protect Our Aquifer.
Hey there, Sarah Houston, Executive Director of Protect Our Aquifer.
Chris Onyx.
We got you, Chris. Thank you. And then Greg Young over there to our far right. Do any of you have an opening statement, or are you just here to answer questions?
I have a statement.
Go ahead. We'll recognize you first, lady.
Thank you so much.
Ladies always first.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, thank y'all so much for the time today. I really do appreciate the conversation that was held last week as well. I could tell it was very informative for you all and for ourselves. I'm the organization's first full-time staff member. Been in this position for about 2.5 years, and got a master's in earth science and been working in water-related fields since 2012. So this is a big passion of mine. Protect Our Aquifer is a nonprofit, and we rely on science and our lived experience to drive our education advocacy. You know, West Tennessee is very unique, and so I wanted to kind of lay the foundation for that in relation to this bill. As the landscape begins to flatten out and kind of head towards the Mississippi, that's the beginning of this incredible aquifer formation. There's a series of aquifers actually, and the primary one, the Memphis Sand, supplies all of the water supply for West Tennessee. So we're talking residential use, irrigation, agricultural use, and industrial use. So no one in West Tennessee is drinking surface water. That's a really important point when we're talking about wetlands. You know, our mission is around protecting and preserving that drinking water supply, and also making sure that we have water for industrial use as this region grows. Our majority focus has been historically in Shelby County, where we have a lot of contamination issues, but that has shifted recently when Ford announced Blue Oval City. The mega site is being developed over the aquifer's recharge zone. The recharge zone, that's a swath of land, parts of 12 counties in West Tennessee, where the sands come near ground surface and rainfall can most directly replenish that water supply. So it's a really vital function for all of West Tennessee. And as y'all likely have heard, you know, these past couple of weeks, wetlands do play a major role in holding that water and recharging that supply. And that's really a water supply for 1.2 million Tennesseans. Now, it's no secret that Ford, you know, chose to come here because of this high quality and plentiful groundwater. So we want to make sure that we're balancing that bank account. We're going to see more and more withdrawals over these next, you know, years to come. We want to make sure the inputs stay equal. And so when Protect Our Aquifer is really thinking about our concerns, it's not just with Ford and the new industrial withdrawals, but it's this new growth that we're expecting in West Tennessee. It's a really exciting time for development. It's an exciting time for this change, but we want to do it with some lessons learned in mind. Like I mentioned, we work in Shelby County a lot. That city developed, Memphis really developed in a time where there were no environmental regulations. There were no protections for wetlands. We paved over all of our wetlands. And now we're dealing with major stream erosion. We're dealing with no rivers that you can eat fish out of. We're dealing with polluted rivers infiltrating into our aquifer system. And we've really just messed up the whole balance equation in Shelby County. And so what we're asking is to think about what do those functions really provide, and how do we value high versus low quality wetlands? You know, the fact is that recharge zone, that 12 county area, it does not all function the same. There are areas where you get deep recharge, you get shallow recharge, you get base flow recharge. There's a lot of things going on. So when we're talking about IDing the value of wetlands, we have to take that into account. So I think I'm done. Okay, my last point is that, you know, we have to think of wetlands as infrastructure. And we really don't want to rush this rulemaking. We were frustrated that TDEC wasn't able to hold these stakeholder meetings. We wish we could have worked all of these details out sooner. Unfortunately, we aren't at that point. So we're asking for this due diligence to really think smart about that. Okay, that's my point.
Scott?
Thank you very much.
Please state your name so everyone on the committee will.
Again, my name is Scott Schaffnacher. I'm Science Director of Protect Our So again, my background is in hydrogeology, which is basically groundwater. I have a PhD in earth sciences from the University of Memphis and a master's in geoscience from Western Kentucky University. I spent the last 17 years working as an environmental consultant and also as a research scientist at the University of Memphis, working on surface and groundwater research in Shelby County in West Tennessee, as well as conducting numerous environmental assessments nationwide. Wetlands obviously are an important part of the hydrologic cycle with the ability to store and filter water as well as contribute to the shallow and deep aquifer recharge. A study in Mississippi with similar soil types and geologic setting as in West Tennessee looked at the impact of agricultural lands, forests, and wetlands and revealed that wetlands contribute about 12% to the shallow aquifer. So what that means is that basically it contributes to stream and river base flow. And this allows for storage and sustainable habitat while helping with wastewater discharge volumes and permitting. The deep aquifer recharge was approximately 1% to 2% from wetlands, which helps provide water for public water supply and irrigation needs in West Tennessee. Again, in West Tennessee, this doesn't seem like much, but in West Tennessee, the primary recharge is the dry upland streams. Dry upland streams where the Memphis sands are at or near the surface and in direct contact with the stream bed. So approximately about 30 years ago, it was thought that most of the recharge in the recharge belt zone allowed for significant recharge. However, recent studies from the University of Memphis indicates that these dry upland streams make up only 7% of the entire recharge zone, so significantly less. So if you think about an aquifer as a bank account, our main source of income would be from these dry upland streams. And so we can think of wetlands as a side hustle for additional income into our aquifer bank account. And if we lose the wetlands, you lose the side hustle. Excuse me. Protector aquifer supports development in this exciting time for West Tennessee, but we must develop in a responsible manner. This is not necessarily the type or size of wetlands, but the location that determines how valuable it is to recharge. We have different zones in Tennessee geologically. We have two options. We can leave the isolated wetlands alone and let nature do the work, or we can pave over and build new systems and replicate what nature has already provided at a low cost. POA's main concern is that the current bill will have unintended consequences and potentially cause irreparable damage to our water supply, a death by 1,000 cuts.
Thank you, Mr. Shop. How do you say your last name?
Schaefernacher.
Schaefernacher. Boy.
You just got all kinds of last names out here.
Mr.
today.
Vangus, we'll recognize you now for an opening statement.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate your taking the time.
Your name and who you're with.
Right. I'm Chris Bonix, and I'm representing myself as a state citizen.
Yes, sir.
I am a hydrologist and a catchment management specialist. I've served as a scientist at a Research One University here in Nashville for the last 17 years. I did my PhD at the University of Sydney in Australia and my master's and bachelor's degrees in geology and soil science at the University of Georgia. So I've seen these problems between how humans interact with water, both in terms of groundwater and surface water interactions, and not only how humans have benefited from it, but also have been impacted by it as well. There are some ways that we think about wetlands, and I think sometimes it can be thought of as that they are a transient system. And one of the things that I would like to bring up is that it really does take a lot of time for these soils to develop those hydric features. You know, in many cases, it takes years of the water being within 18 inches of the soil surface for a period of weeks at a time, right? So these aren't things that just are created out of nothing. They are things that evolve over time. And that evolution has created a very unique structure in that it's able to hold on to water for a longer time than just flat sheet flow that goes into the river. One of the things that happens is those roots, right, because they are not able to soak in oxygen, have to become a lot more dense. We begin to have these spongy types of environments. Now, organic carbon is really important in this realm because it holds on to a lot more water than soil minerals do. And it serves as a banking system. So it's not only going to protect you from floodwaters, but it's also going to hold on to that water for a lot longer. And that means it can actually help drought mitigation in the areas around it, right? Because that water is eventually going to seep into those soils that are wanting to pull on that water because they've run out of water, right? It's a major potential of those soils. I would also like to point out that, you know, when we think about these systems, there's a lot that's at stake here. You know, 400,000 acres is a lot of wetland. And as you heard earlier, you know, a 1 acre of wetland can hold 1 million gallons of water. That's a lot of water, right? That's a lot of water we're keeping out of our waterways temporarily, right? We know that that water is not completely disconnected, right? These systems all exist underground. Water is not just going to stay in a basin unless you, like you mentioned, if you have a clay liner, yeah, sure, that will hold it for some time. But in many cases, these are natural systems that are going to slowly leak into and contribute to base flow and be able to clean up water before it makes it to our aquifers. I'm glad you guys brought that up. It's a very important topic. Oh, thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll come back to you with a few questions in
My
a minute.
apologies.
I did not recognize Alex while ago. I'm sorry with that with TEMA. So would you please state your name, and if you have an opening statement, that's fine. And if not, you can hand it off to Greg.
Yes, sir. Alex Pellman, the Chief of Staff at Tennessee Emergency Management Agency. Here to answer questions, and I'll turn it over.
Mr. Young, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, for the chance to appear before you again. Last time I started off my presentation with 2 words, leadership and accountability. This time I'm going to start it off with 2 words, respect and candor. Respect because I think I have to, and TDEC has to, respect the role of you as elected officials that make decisions. Candor because I believe our role is to provide honest, transparent, candid information, the best information possible to help inform that decision-making process. In that vein, I do want to clarify some statements that I've heard now 2 or 3 times by the Honorable Chairman Vaughn about other states and WOTUS. And I've heard that Tennessee is somehow different from other states in how we apply how we define waters of the state. And I think he cited to an article. And so as a lawyer, I pulled the statutes for those states to find out what 3 surrounding states actually apply. And I'll just read, in Alabama, it says, any body of accumulation of water, surface water or groundwater or public or private, natural or artificial. Similarly broad in Mississippi. Waters of the state means all waters within the jurisdiction of the state, et cetera, et cetera. Georgia, similar broad definition. Water states means any and all rivers, streams, creeks, boundary drainage systems, springs, wells, other bodies of surface or subsurface water. All that to say, I am not so sure that Tennessee is somehow far outfield from our neighboring states when I pull their statutes and actually read how those states regulate waters of their states. The other, with respect, so that was kind of in trying to provide honest and transparent information to you to respect your role as a decision maker. I think it's important to clarify that point. And I'll be glad to provide those citations and documents to you if you need them. While Chairman Vaughn's proposal would in fact probably reduce upfront costs and burdens upon developers and the like, we at TDEC fear that the proposed could result in greater back-end costs and burdens for Tennessee taxpayers. And I will conclude by saying we believe that would happen in the form of, and I think it fairly summarizes what I've heard from some of the witnesses in 3 F's. Flow, aquifer recharge. That's what we're talking about, sustains the base flow of our streams, okay? Is that aquifer recharge.
Mr. Young,
Second.
you're out of time.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Todd.
I did have a couple of questions, or well, one to start with, that some of the comments you made. So to go back to the statement you made about the regulations in other states, and that their general broad law is that they regulate waters of the state. Do they have something else? I'm trying to get to the summary that has been presented to us before about those other states. Do they have something else that somehow excludes isolated wetlands or some other wording, some other definition from regulation as waters of the state?
I do not know off the top of my head. All I wanted to do was I had heard that statement made that other states apply waters of the U.S. post Sackett. And so what I did was just look up their definitions in their statutes to check. And from what I see, their definitions are broad. Now, whether there are regulatory nuances, I personally don't know. That could well be the case, sir.
Chairman Todd? Thank you, sir. And I appreciate that. I think that'd be worth checking into, because that
Yes,
could
sir.
be, I mean, maybe splitting hairs, but I think the follow-ups in regulations or laws that affect that and those definitions in waters of the state probably maybe where this is, the differences are. And you had another point or two you were going to make, and I'd love to hear that.
Go back and start that first F, and we're going to finish there.
Yes, sir. The 3 Fs. I like alliteration. The first F was flow, relating to how being able to recharge aquifers, as you've heard some of our witnesses talk about, actually sustains that base flow in the stream, meaning that if you're in a dry season, you still have a stream that's flowing. It's because there's some influence that's coming from things like wetlands that sustain that flow. Why is that important? Well, we need that water for various purposes. Sometimes we need to be able to discharge things into it. And so there's this concept of assimilative capacity that comes into play, needing to maintain base flow for assimilative capacity. There's also the concept of needing to have enough drinking water. So that basic flow is important. The second thing that we talked about, and Chairman Todd, I know, when it comes to filling it up, or I think Commissioner Sawyer's wanted me to say, fill her up, Greg, but that's something you mentioned previously. And so recognizing that as a worthy thing that these wetlands do, and a risk that if we do not protect some wetlands like this, that could be a risk on taxpayers. Chairman Reedy, you also have mentioned flooding several times. That is the second F involved in the value of wetlands that could be impacted through this legislation. I don't think we need to belabor that point. We've established that. The third that I'll offer up is filtration. And filtration is important for our surface waters, because the more we lose these wetlands, the more flashy types of rain events that will create the runoff into these streams that will degrade the streams, and you lose that ability to filter pollutants and silt and everything else that the wetlands currently provide. So those were my 3 Fs. I have a 4th F, and this is just a personal one. Wetlands are fun, guys. I went to my favorite isolated wetland to duck hunt on Sunday, and I literally did not fire a shot, but I have fun in them. And so for me personally, there's a 4th F, but I don't know if I should even put that on the record, but I did. Sorry.
Well, Friday I went to one of mine, and we brought 9 out. Me and a
Yeah,
buddy,
you did better than me, sir.
Chairman Halsey?
Thank you. Thank you for all being here today. I understand where Chairman Vaughn's coming from. We see it all the time. You see it through the years. People gripe and grumble about it, and I've griped and grumbled about it too. When you take rule-making bodies, a lot of times they go way, way beyond reasonable. They almost become self-absorbed in authority, and normal people like me have to jump through hoops that you don't understand to meet rules that you don't understand, made from people that aren't elected and don't answer to anybody. So people get really weary of that, and be honest with you, I get weary of it too. The other side of that is we have a responsibility as stewards of the land that God gave us to take care of it. So here I am, usually not a middle of the road person at all, saying we got to find a middle of the road solution here that is not overbearing, that it doesn't deprive liberty, but that is responsible. Now, having said all that, I'm a simple person, so I don't always understand some of the terminology, but it seems to me that everything is a wetlands in one regard, because when it snows and it seeps down through the soil, it may stay 18 inches under there, but at some point, gravity pulls it on down at some point in time, it seems to me, which would make everything you have land-wise some form of an aquifer or some form of a wetlands. Is that a reasonable assumption? And if not, can you explain to me why not?
Mr. Young, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. I understand your frustration and I respect your concerns. I do not believe that is a reasonable assertion from the standpoint there since 1987 or 1986 from a facility in my hometown of Vicksburg, Mississippi. There was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers put together a manual that says, here is what a wetland is, okay? That's not a TDEC manual. That is the Army Corps of Engineers Waterways Experiment Station. And what that manual and then the law and regs actually reflect is you have to have three things to be a wetland, okay? One is you have to have hydrology. That means the water coming through either up, down, around. You got to have hydrology. The second thing is that you have to have hydric soils, okay? The third thing is hydric plants. So my understanding, what I have always been taught from a legal perspective, is that the absence of one of those means you do not have a wetland. So when people are delineating wetlands, you have to have those three.
Chairman Halsey.
I don't know what the plants are, but this is just asking because I appreciate the information.
Yes, sir.
Stuff I did not know. Is it specific plants defined by just a very few that would be akin to, in my way of thinking, where we shut down a whole process over a snail darter that we lost anyway? Is it that kind of thing, or are these common plants that grow other places as well?
My understanding is that they are specific wetland plants, but I certainly welcome any support from other. I'm a recovering lawyer, so I respect other people that may have more technical knowledge on the specific types of plants.
Mr. Venegas.
Yes, sir. So just to add to that, so the plants themselves are an indicator of the function of the soil and the reduction that's happening. So one of the main things that happens when the soil has been saturated for a long period of time in the presence of organic matter is that it goes from oxidizing to reducing. So when that switch happens, a lot of different processes change. Things like iron. So one of the things we look at when we look at to define a wetland is the movement of iron through that solution. It takes a long time for iron to go into solution and then re-precipitate it out. So you can see that that system is behaving differently than a typical well-oxygenated system. Does that clarify?
Yeah, thank you. Any further questions, Chairman Halsey? I've got one with in regards, I guess teammate would probably answer this one. It was brought up a few minutes ago about flooding, and if Chairman Vaughn's bill were to move forward and become law, that it could somehow affect or make flooding worse in certain areas. Can you give us a rundown on that and how that maybe, is that real?
Yes, sir, Chairman. I will.
State your name, please.
Alex Pelham, Chief of Staff, TEMA. And thank you for allowing us to be here. I've worked directly with most of you, and if not in tandem with Director Sheehan on, unfortunately, a lot of natural disasters in my 2.5 years here. So our stance as we come here today is not really to talk about the regulation piece or the permitting piece. We don't consider ourselves experts in any way, shape, or form on that. The last time I did permits was for hot dog vendors at the Republican National Convention in 2016. So I would choose to stay out of that completely. But I do think there are some things that we know that we can state. We know wetlands take in water. We know that 2018, 2019, and 2020 are among the top 5 wettest years since 1895 in the state of Tennessee. These are things that come from the National Centers for Environmental Information with NOAA, the storm database. There have been 3,700 flooding events in Tennessee since 1996. We've seen 100 deaths as a result of this, $5 billion in property damage. So as the chairman said, I like to keep things pretty simple. When water comes down, I can't control the amount of water the good Lord pushes down here. But I think it is a safe assertion that water is going to go somewhere. And as we've seen increased flooding, day 6 of my tenure here was the flooding in Humphreys County. So I've been attached to this issue since the day I got here. The water is going to go somewhere. And I would just ask that the Chairman Vaughn, as you deliberate on this, as Chairman Vaughn works on this with TDEC, that you take into consideration that there is the possibility of increasing flooding, especially if there aren't additional mitigation pieces taken into place going on.
Well, I'm going to speak for Chairman Vaughn here. I know for a fact he does not want to see that happen. He does not want to see any more flooding take place, and that's not his intention. I think I'll have the latitude to go in that direction there for Chairman Vaughn. Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentleman in the purple tie, I apologize.
Yes, sir.
You caught my attention with the reduction, oxidation, balance thing. And so we talked back in the spring and we mentioned during this discussion topic last week, the use of metrology type stations across the state. Would that be a parameter, do you know, that we would be monitoring in those centers?
I would say that the things that really matter are the reduction oxidation potential for the soil. So you can it's a probe, like electrical chemical probe that you can use to determine how much oxygen is being consumed in that environment. So it's exactly like you would look at, for example, the soil profile itself. The gray that's in there, that means that iron's been removed from that system, right? That happens much quicker than it takes to reallocate that iron to move it around. So you could see it much quicker.
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one follow-up on that. We're commanded, God has blessed us in Tennessee, with lots of good things, and we're commanded to subdue the earth. And so in that subduing of the earth, can we reach a balance? And I think that's the middle ground that my colleague's referring to there. So that's the charge I would ask.
Anyone? Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was born and raised on a farm way down. In fact, the groundhogs used to bring our mail. We were so far back, but I've heard more about wetlands and learned more about it in the last 2 weeks in my whole life. But in listening to all of this discussion, I'm sitting here thinking, but I guess I call these growing pains because Tennessee is moving forward. And we got a lot of things going on in Tennessee, successful things. And I don't think I can hold the past responsible for what the future brings. I just think that everybody that's involved in this, not some groups, but all of the groups ought to just sit down in a room and come up what's best for the state of Tennessee. It's hard to legislate something like this because I think everybody at the table has a point, and I think everybody, including the sponsor, I think everybody has a good point, but I don't think I'm going to be able to sit here and hold Tennessee responsible for what it has not done if we're going to move forward in the future. And I just wanted to put that in the record to say, I believe that if everybody involved in this would just sit down and talk, not argue, not throw bricks at each other, but talk, they could figure something out. I think we're smart enough to do that. Because you make the point, the sponsor don't want flooding. Nobody wants flooding. We don't want anything that's going to damage us, but I think we want something that's going to move us forward. I just want to make a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I had a couple of questions. Maybe I may direct the first one to Mr. Blackwood, if I could. And that's the flood mitigation, since we're on that topic. It's been mentioned that obviously wetlands play a role in mitigating flooding and absorbing the runoff and slowing it down, filtering, all of those things. Is it a fair statement then that in situations where we're talking about low quality, isolated wetlands specifically, that can fairly easily be mitigated from a civil engineering standpoint in most situations?
Mr. Blackwood, you recognize?
Yes. So for when we're talking about, as I understand, like incidental wetlands and man-made, or if they're small enough, it's always a question of size and what they actually contribute to flooding. Just a comment on flooding, just to take it to a really basic level. What is flooding? It's water getting to a point quicker than we would like. More water coming to a spot quicker than we would like. If it moves slowly off land, it becomes a wetland. It stays there longer. So it's kind of impossible it doesn't impact flooding to have a wetland. But we do have regulations for detention and how we design systems. And that's a really important part of development. I'm glad to hear that brought up because that can help address the flooding portion.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The next question might be for Ms. Houston or Mr. Schaffernacher. There was mention of the role of dry upland streams and the recharge of aquifers. So I guess the first technical question is the definition of a dry upland stream, because I do stream determinations as part of my living. And so generally, if it's dry and upland, it's not a stream. Now, granted, that doesn't mean it's not, filtering some of the runoff down into the aquifer, and maybe that was a real broad term you used to capture anything that may have a sandy type bottom that does allow that. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that technicality, and then also maybe what you've learned, what the research has shown to be the role, because I didn't understand that exact part of what is the role, maybe percentage wise. I know I'm going to throw another statement out that I've heard, and I believe is still true. I know at one time several years ago, I was told by the University of Memphis that we know how much water is coming out of our aquifer. We just have no idea how much is going in it, which is kind of scary, but it makes sense when you think about all the different ways water gets into that aquifer and how it has over thousands of years. So if you can kind of help me get that straight, I would appreciate, and knowing what the science is showing about the percentages in those channels versus wetlands, maybe.
Okay.
Recognized.
So the dry upland streams really are ephemeral streams. So they're convey water only during rain events. And they're disconnected from the aquifer system. So the research site that we worked at was near LaGrange, Tennessee, where depth of groundwater was like 140 feet from the upland areas. So throughout most of West Tennessee, you have a loss cap that's windblown silt. So it's kind of almost a confining unit almost at the top. It's hard to get water through. So if you have a drop of water in the loss cap in the upland area, it takes approximately 100 years for that drop of water to infiltrate down to the groundwater surface at that site. So we looked at the stream valley hills going into the upland, what we called streams, and realized that sand of the Memphis sand and the alluvial sand allowed for direct infiltration. Obviously, water flowed through the system during precipitation events, but it was also allowing the water to get into the system. So instead of it taking 100 years to get in, it's a seasonal change. You can see that. As far as quantity, I'd have to go back and look at the report, but in other areas like Sandy Creek in Jackson, Tennessee, where it's kind of the same situation where you have these incised rivers, but it's disconnected from the traditional floodplain. we see recharge rates of a half a meter to close to a meter, so about 2 to 3 feet, going through these channels. So it's not really the upland areas, but again, it's focused on these incised streams past below that lust cap.
Chairman Todd?
No other questions, unless Ms. Houston we'd probably
You
just have a
recognize?
couple of minutes.
And we are running short on time.
Sure. No, I think that's a really great question. And you asked about the kind of the balance in the bank account. You know, we know that we withdraw regionally about 200 million gallons of water a day. And we don't know how much is recharged. We know about how much a day can get in certain sites. And I think that is kind of at the crux of valuation of the value of these wetlands. What is high value? What is moderate? What is low? If it's a, four-wheeled track, some kids have been tearing up wetland, but it's in these areas that do have very specific recharge avenues, that could be a high value to our aquifer system. But how do we determine that based on location? I think that is kind of lost in the definitions and in this process right now. So also want to put a plug in for in the future, having a groundwater monitoring well network in West Tennessee. We really need to start to address that input equation because we just don't have any clue. So future opportunity.
Chairman Todd? You're good? Okay, well, we are up against a hard break. So without objection, we'll go back into session. Thank you all so much for being here and all the people that drove so far. And I guess we'll pick this thing back up next Tuesday morning, 10:30. If I can entertain a motion. We have a motion to adjourn. We adjourn. And this will roll to the next week's calendar without charging the sponsor with a roll.